Hello there, this is Kush Sharma, your photography and videography instructor from Creative Pad Media, and in this tutorial we're going to be learning how to create cartoons out of regular images of people, just like the image that you are seeing in front of you. So we are going to be completely transforming this image. Now there are a lot of points to discuss before we actually get started, and one of the points is this process of turning an image into a cartoon, okay, also called as the Cartoonize effect, as later you're going to be learning. It's also called as the Caricature effect. This process can actually be done with one click, which is just by going to this filter menu here, going to filter gallery, and this whole cartoon effect is actually given by this effect called as poster edges. Okay, so if I were just to, like, this is the before, if you just click on this, okay, so you can kind of start to get that cartoon effect. And if I was to click on OK like this would just apply. Okay, so a lot of people go for this effect. This is not, this is something we will be doing. We will be using this filter to give that cartoonish look later on, but it's just going to be one small ingredient in what we are trying to achieve. We are trying to do something way more advanced than what you just saw, because what you just saw can easily be done outside of Photoshop using free apps, filter-based apps also. So we are doing something which only Photoshop can do, and one of those, so this whole process, okay, is basically divided into two steps. The first step is that we are actually, first of all, going to distort the body of this person. That means what we're going to do is we're going to make the head bigger and the body smaller. Okay, that is what is really going to give it that cartoon effect, because cartoons don't look like normal people. They look irregular and imperfect. Once we've got those disproportionate body parts in place, that is the time we'll be using different filters to create that cartoon effect. And the poster edge filter that you just saw, that's just going to be one effect. We're going to be using multiple effects to create a much more pleasing looking cartoon. Okay, so let me just show you caricature. Basically, if you type it on Google, you can see here, you must have seen these kind of drawings. A lot of tabloids use it for their cartoons, you know. So you can see here, like, you know, famous celebrities being turned into caricatures. And the best part about this is that, you know, if you do master this skill, you can actually monetize it. Because the first thing that you see here is a lot of people are selling these designs also, because they are in a lot of demand. Once you can turn a regular person into a caricature like this, like you can see Dwayne Johnson here, you know, people love that being done to themselves. Even if you're a portrait person, let's say you shoot portfolios for people, you can add this one shot and maybe even charge, you know, for that. Okay. So anyway, we don't want to get into too much of that discussion, but right now let's start with the process. So here we have this image. As usual, I've given the link to the stock image in the description, so you can practice along with me. That's usually the best approach. Also, just a couple of other things. If you don't have a strong enough system, okay, like a very good laptop or a PC, then what you can do is just, when you go here and you open up any image, let's say if you're doing this for your own image, go to image, go to image size. Now this image that we are using is already around 2000 pixels in width. So that's fine. Anything between 2000 to 4000 is fine, because what's going to happen is, like I said, we're going to be using a lot of filters, and these filters work on each pixel of the image. Therefore, it can just really slow down the rendering process, produce a lot of lags if you have a regular DSLR size image like 6000 by 4000 pixels, okay? So I'm not saying it can't be done to those images. It's just that when you're doing it as a beginner, you're doing it for the first time to learn the process, and you're going to be slow. You don't want to get frustrated by that lag every time. So you can decrease the image size initially when you're doing it. Okay. So let's say somewhere between 2000 to 4000 is absolutely fine. We're already in that range, you can see here. Okay. So I'm going to click on OK. It's just a bonus tip. You don't, by the way, have to actually do that. All right. So as I was just talking about lags and being frustrated by Photoshop, my own Photoshop crashed. Okay, so we are back up and running now. So let's start the whole process. So this is going to be the first step, which is distorting the body. For that, in this image, we need to get rid of the background first, because we have an uneven background, and then cutting out the head and doing things with the body can just be tough if you have this uneven background. If you have a solid, absolutely plain solid color background, which is equal everywhere, then you don't have to do the step which I'm doing right now, but it's a very easy step, which is just to basically remove the background. And how you do that is you go to select, you go to subject, and that's going to make a selection here. And for this tutorial, when you're making these cartoons, caricatures, you don't really have to go into select and mask and refine this, because nobody will be able to notice if a strand of hair is missing from a cartoon. Because ultimately this face is going to get so distorted, it's not really going to matter too much in these images, okay? So once we've got a decent enough selection, and this looks pretty decent, right? We can just simply open up a layer mask like this, okay? And that is basically going to get rid of the background here, like you can see. Now, we don't want to have this layer mask being seen here. It's just going to cause a lot of confusion. It's going to restrict our workflow. So I'm just going to right click on it and just click on apply layer mask. So that's just going to basically turn this into, like, think of it like a brand new image that we've just opened minus the background. So we can even like move this person easily everywhere. Okay, now this makes our job easier. So remember, we're on the first step, trying to make the head bigger, body smaller. We're still not going to do that cartoon thing till we've achieved this particular step. So how do we start? First of all, we need to make a selection of only the head. Okay, for this, a lot of ways to do that. I'm going to be using the lasso tool because this is easy. You can just freely draw. Just make sure you're just, around this neck area and just close this down. So you have the selection of the head. Now what we want is, we want the head and the body on two separate layers. Okay, so right now they're all in one layer. So we want this selection to come on a separate layer. Okay, there's a shortcut for this, which is Control and J, but I'm not going to show you that because I like to explain also how things work. So we want this on a new layer. You right click on this selection and simply you say layer via copy, or even layer via cut will work, but you never know when you require the original head also. You may just require it. So we're going to click on layer via copy, basically Control C, Control V. That's what we're doing. Okay, so I click on this and just see the head. You can see this in the thumbnail. The head comes on a separate layer. Now you can see we can actually, if I highlight this layer, we can actually move this. Okay, so what we're going to do here is we're going to make this bigger. So I'm going to press Control T, that stands for transform. You can also go here. You'll find transform here, but I'm just going to press Control, or there'll be Command on the Mac, and I'm going to press T. So you get these things to stretch this image, transform this image. I'm going to make it slightly bigger like this. Okay, hit Enter. And then I'm going to go to this body layer and I'm going to do the opposite, Control T, but this time I'm actually going to make it small. So that's usually done in caricatures. You can do the opposite also. It probably can look a bit out of place, but that's also fine. So I'm going to press this. Now, the main thing here is, of course, this is not looking good, right? We need to find a way to fix this neck on the small body neck now. Now, this is a part which can be done in a lot of ways, slightly more advanced ways or slightly more amateurish ways. I'll deliberately be showing you the more beginner-friendly way, okay? Because, this is slightly a beginner-friendly tutorial. The advanced way of doing this would be to actually, let me just kind of give you at least a glimpse of it. So to click on this layer, go to Filter, go to Liquify, which allows you to change the shape of the body, the face, and all these things. We'll actually be using the Liquify filter again, okay? But not for this purpose. Here we have this forward warp tool. So what I can do here is just try to stretch the neck and make it smaller like this, and then join it with this using a layer mask, okay? I don't want to show you that. What we'll do is, okay, and the approach I'm going to be showing you also looks fine, which is simply going to remove the neck and just place the head on the body. That's it, okay? That also looks fine. I've tried both the approaches. Fine, so this is just slightly easier. So with this, basically what our task right now is to just get rid of this neck part here. So I'm going to slightly zoom in, Control plus, and also use, one of the options here, I can't find it right now, but Control plus or Command plus, and you'll be able to easily zoom in. Now we have this head layer selected. We need to now make our selection manually only till this beard part. Okay, we want to avoid this neck part. So I'm going to take the quick selection tool this time. That just makes the job easier for us, and just make a selection of the head. Okay, like this. Now it's going to automatically select the whole thing usually, okay, because that's where the pixels are. But you can hold down Alt. So you can see here, the moment we have this minus thing here, either you can click on that or you can hold down Alt and just notice the cursor turns into a minus. That means we can now decrease from the selection also, okay, like this. So make sure we just want this. So something like this. It doesn't really have to be too perfect, okay? You can do something like this, it's fine. But basically we avoid most of the neck here. Now this we will have to just refine a bit. So what we're going to do is, once we made this rough selection, we're just going to go to select. We're going to go to select and mask. And usually you might be seeing something like the onion skin selection here. Make sure just you select black and white, okay? So that we exactly are seeing whatever is white here is showing our selection. Now you can see here that this selection is good everywhere except for this part where the selection is very jagged. That's because we used the quick selection tool here, right? We were doing the minus plus thing. How can we just refine this part so the hair are just taken into account into the selection in a much more random way? We can use the refine edge brush tool and using that just run it from this part. What we want is just a look like this. You can see here, I'll just produce that look where we know that the selection is a bit more random, it's not very jagged, and that's all you have to do. Just click on OK. Okay, like I said, this whole thing doesn't have to be perfect because we are making a cartoon, remember, okay? Now that we know we have a much better selection here, what we can do is here, just open up a layer mask. And that's basically going to get rid of that bad looking neck. Okay, now you can see that some of our selection got eaten up from here. Let me zoom in more. So wherever you're seeing the checkered transparent background basically behind, that means the selection also is not there. So what we can do is, remember, this is on a layer mask. You can always take a paintbrush, make sure black is selected. Remember, black, or rather actually white. Remember, white reveals and black conceals. So I'm going to take white and just run it here. Okay, make sure it's selected to layer mask. You can even right click, decrease the hardness of this brush a bit, and just get those parts back into the selection. Okay, see here, even we lost some of it here. So select and mask sometimes doesn't do a very accurate job, but you can see it still helped us so much, right? And now some of the parts here, like you can see, this probably doesn't look that great. Don't worry, because right now you're feeling like that because we're seeing the transparent background behind. Now what we're going to do is we're just going to add a random background. Okay, now this is not a 100% compulsory step. It's just that it'll make you feel more confident about your edit, because this whole edit will just look much better because you won't see these little things here. Okay, so just zoom in again once more. Sometimes this can just take a bit of time to get this perfect, but like I said, in this tutorial it's not that important. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a solid background behind. So we're going to add a new layer. Make sure this layer is right underneath both these layers, the body and the head, and just fill it with any color. So we're going to go to edit. Let's say go to fill. In contents, make sure color is selected and just select any color here. Okay, I'll go with blue or whatever color was selected there. And you can see this looks good. So you can see those parts now don't look too bad. So we can again zoom in. Okay, we have a bit of this ghosting effect left here. We can always go back to our mask. This time we want to remove things here. So we can go to black. You know, black conceals it. And just move this. Okay. And that is pretty much, we are good to go with this. Okay. So we have achieved one major task, which is that we have been able to get the look of the caricature at least. Now will be the second part where we'll play around with the skin and get that cartoon effect. So let's go there. All right, so to start off this second part, the first step that we're going to do is we're just going to basically merge these three layers into one so that we don't really get too confused. Now you can, if you're a complete beginner, you can even right click and click on merge layers, but that would make your process destructive. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to do something smarter, and the thing itself is called smart object, which is convert to smart object. We're going to click in on this option. I'll just show you what this does. If you would have just merged it, it would have just merged it like a normal layer, but this time do you notice that we have something on the thumbnail like this thing, which signifies it's a smart object. That means if I was to double click on it right now, like this, it actually opens up on a separate tab and you can see those three layers again. So you have, if you wanted to make any other changes, you still can. That's why it's a smart layer, okay, smart object. Now I usually don't like to work anytime on the base layer, okay, so we've just converted this into a smart object layer. We're just going to call it original so that later on we have something to compare it to. And what we're going to do is we're going to do all our cartoon work, which is going to start now on a separate layer. So we're going to duplicate this layer by right clicking on it. And we're going to call this, let's say, even if we don't change the name, it's fine, but we're going to call it the effect or cartoon effect, okay? And we're going to do all our stuff here, later on compare it with the original. So what are we going to do? The first step is actually probably, out of all these steps that we've done, this is going to be absolutely mind-blowing. It's my favorite part, okay, which is we're actually going to change this face, and before we work on the skin and give it the cartoon effect, we're going to actually change the facial features into something which resembles more like a cartoon, okay? So you're going to, with this layer selected, and you can still see this is also a smart object layer because we duplicated it. We're going to go to filter, and we're going to, again, remember we saw the Liquify filter and told you we're going to be using this for something else. So we're going to be using this, and this particular aspect of it is absolutely mind-blowing, which is face-aware Liquify. So this tool automatically recognizes the different facial features which we have complete control over, the eyes, the nose, and we're going to distort all of them because a cartoon is distorted, right? Now, I should point out, in case you're using a very old version of Photoshop, I think after 2015, CC 2015 is the time they introduced this. But in case you don't see this, you have an older version, you can even use these manual tools to at least achieve something in a much more manual way, whatever I'm going to be showing you here. But this is just much better, as you're going to see. So for example, under the eyes, we can change the eye size. So just see what happens on the left. You see the left eye just became bigger, okay? Now, if you don't want to do this again and again for both the eyes, because usually whatever effect we are applying, we want it to apply to both the eyes simultaneously. So you can check this link option for all four of these, because we're going to be changing all four. So change this together, that's all. So we're going to change the eye height also. You can see the eye size changed, the eye height also, and here you don't have to copy what I'm doing. You can absolutely go, be creative. So eye width also, try to make it as distorted as possible. Eye tilt, either you can go for inward tilt or outward tilt. I'll go for the outward one. Eye distance, either you can make it closer or you can make it away. So I'm going to go for something like this, okay? Nose height, you can see here, we're just going to increase the nose height and the width. It's really just turning this face, really distorting it, okay? That's how caricatures look. Smile, now this is absolutely amazing. Just see this. You can actually make this person smile more. We can change the upper lip, intensity of it, the lower lip. Play around with this. This is just fun. Change the mouth width, mouth height also. You can see we really made that smile very emphatic, okay? Face shapes, you can either make the forehead bigger or smaller. Usually for caricatures, bigger works better. Chin height, let's make the chin a bit longer or shorter. Let's see which one looks better. Actually, both look fine. I'll go for the longer one, okay? Jawline, you can increase the width of it. So either you can do this or you can do this also. So let me do this. And face width also. Let's really make it distorted. We can go on for the narrow one also. So you can see now this is not full, maybe just push these down a bit. Yeah, something like this looks fine, and then you can just click on OK, and it's just going to apply this, and you can see now, big difference, right? Now it really starts to get that cartoon effect. Now is the time that we've got this look. Now is the time that we will actually start to work on the skin and give it that cartoon-like look. All right, so now you must be thinking, Kush, so is this the time that we go to that poster edge thing that you showed us before? We're still not there, okay? Because let me show you. If I was to directly now go to filter gallery, and then use our poster edges effect, which can be found under the artistic folder. So if you're finding all this closed, open up the artistic folder, select poster edges, and then you'll see this. Let's just zoom out a bit to see what's happening here. And you can see. So first of all, let me just talk a bit about this, okay? Let's put everything to 0, all the sliders. We will be using this again, but right now let me show you why I don't want to use it. So if you move this posterization slider, this is the main one which creates this cartoon effect, okay? If it's closer to 0, it really, basically it's working on the tones of the skin, really kind of gives that cartoon-like look, but you can also make it less subtle by actually increasing the slider like this. But the problem here is, right now if you see, you're getting too much of that grainy look here, okay? Now this can depend on a lot of factors like the original noise in the shot, the texture of the skin that the person has, but usually in almost 99% of the images, you're going to face this problem that you're not going to get a very smooth and even looking skin if you directly use poster edges. This is why we're not going to use it right now, and I'm going to click on cancel. Okay, we will be using it, but later, because first of all, we have to smoothen the skin out. So if I zoom in, okay, we really have to make this much more smoother and cartoon-like first. So there's another filter called oil paint filter, which will just give it that painting-like look first, and we're going to be using that first, okay? By the way, one great advantage of using the Smart Object tool, apart from it being non-destructive, is that these filters that you get here, remember we use the Liquify filter, you can double-click on them anytime to go back to them and change those values again if you want. That's another great advantage of using a smart filter. Again, it's like a non-destructive thing. That's what I'm talking about, okay? Because we are going to be using a lot of filters. For example, the next one is going to be the oil paint filter to smoothen out the skin. Now, this can be found under Stylize, Oil Paint, or in some Photoshop versions, you'll just find it somewhere here, right here, okay? So for me, it's right here. And you can click on oil paint, and what this does is, as you're going to see, it basically turns it into like a painting-like effect. Just see the before and after. Okay, you can play around with the sliders here. We're getting a close-up preview here. You can see the skin, what it does to the skin. It kind of gives you that brush strokes if you were actually painting this, okay, like a digital painting. And you can control the amount of it from this slider, so feel free to play around with this. I see a lot of tutorials where people just give exact values. We don't want to be doing that, okay? You can play around with these things. Usually if you have a very high resolution image, like a proper DSLR image, you might require a higher number here, okay? Cleanliness means like how clean is it? You can play around with this. So you can, let's say, keep it something like 6200, okay? Scale, Bristol detail. Don't worry too much about this, play with it, but usually something like this works. Basically, just look for the smoothness on the skin and also on the hair, okay? If you get something like this, it's absolutely fine because each image will differ on these values. Make sure this lighting option is set to off, okay? Otherwise, it just really enhances that texture and that doesn't look good because we're trying to do the opposite, remember? So we're going to switch off this lighting or uncheck this rather, and we're going to click on OK. So this has already given us a much smoother effect than what we had before, but still, if I was to zoom in, it still leaves those lines, right? That is the downside of using the oil paint filter. It looks fantastic on things like hair, but just on the skin, sometimes it can look a bit bad, okay? So what we can do here is just apply a blur to this image, okay? That will just smoothen out everything on the skin. So again, we go to filter, we go to blur, and to be frank, you can choose any of these options, most of these options, okay? But we're going to use surface blur because that just works in a very nice way. So you can see here, play around with these values. Just make sure you choose something which is not blurring it too much also, but so if I click on the cheek, for example, just looking at a preview here that yes, it should, like we started off with 0 or 1, it's like this, just till that point where we see this has become smooth, okay? Again, this will differ if you're using a different image. So just, so I'm telling you what you should be looking out for rather than just giving you values on the slider. Okay, so I think this looks fine. It is going to become a bit blurred. Don't worry about that. Later on, we will be adding a filter which is also going to sharpen things, which will be done at the end, okay? Right now, just focus on this because our main job right now, why we're doing this, is so that we can apply that poster etch filter in a much better way. So you can see right now, if you just compare it to the original, which is underneath this, you see the difference? It looks much smoother. All that noise has just gone, okay? Now is the time we'll go to filter and we're going to use that poster etch filter. And before I do that, let me just show you one neat little trick. That's the advantage of using these smart objects. Remember, we're getting these things here, all of them stacked on each other. Let's just say, okay, that I felt the blur that I applied was too much. And what you can do is you can always double click here on this filter and it'll just open up the filter again and you can change the values again. Okay, that's why it's totally non-destructive. You can even, so you can do that, or another way is you can click on this thing, these control-like icon, that opens up something slightly different, okay? So this is also related to the surface blur filter that we applied, but it's just that we can decrease the opacity rather than working with those sliders. Just like how you decrease the opacity of the layers, just decrease the opacity, and 0 opacity means nothing's applied. And let's say if I choose something like 90%, that means 90% of the effect of this is applied. So you basically have complete control. You can't go wrong with this, okay? So I'm going to, let's say I was okay with 100, so I'm going to just go with that. And now we're going to go to filter, filter gallery. And remember, I already selected from artistic, I've already clicked on poster edges, so it's already there. I'm going to select this, zoom out a bit, And now you can see it looks much better than what we had before. Let's reduce everything to 0 once again. Let's start. So we don't want to have this. I like to have it somewhere where it starts to look a bit even, which in this case I think is at 4. See, at 4 it looks good. Edge intensity is about how much of these little lines, like the cheek lines, the wrinkles, the little hair, they stand out. For example, this will be too much, I feel. Okay, you can go something like 1 is fine. Okay, again, this is subjective. Go with your own judgment also. Edge thickness, we're mainly talking about the main edges. So if I go like all the way to 10, it really makes those edges a bit thick. So we can at least go to something like 7 or 6, because cartoons usually do have sometimes thick edges. And just kind of makes it look like a drawing, which is what we're going for. Again, go with your own judgment. Now, you can click on OK. Another effect that I usually like to try along with this, and I say try because what I'm going to show you doesn't apply to all images, okay, is under the Distort folder this time, you have this effect which is called Diffuse Glow. You can see I was already practicing this before, so this is already selected. I just have to unhide this. But if I just select this, what this does is it just adds a bit of highlights to those, like a glow to wherever the light was falling. So we have 3 again sliders here. I like to keep clear amount at highest, because what happens is if it's less, it just fades out everything like this. We don't want that. The main slider here is the glow amount slider, which will control the amount of glow. You don't want something like this. You want it to be slightly subtle. Okay, not this subtle also, but something like this. Maybe, yeah, this is, I think, looking fine. And you can add a bit of grains if you want. If you just slightly want, get a bit of sharpness back, it's not really required here. So even you can leave it at 1. Problem here is I don't want to apply this right now because it's messed up our background also. So if I hide this, just see. If I didn't have the background, it wouldn't have been such a problem. If you don't care about the background, you can do it right now. It's not such a big problem, okay? I'm going to apply this later on, towards the end, okay? So that we will be able to mask it out and just only apply it on the face. So right now I'm going to unhide it. If you don't care about the background, you can just click on it and click on OK, and you'll be just done at the same time. I'm going to click on OK, and you can see now it starts to really look good. Just zoom in. I'm only mainly concerned about the top part here. Let's just quickly compare it with the original. So we're going to hide this, and you can see this is a huge, huge difference. Now remember, we have been applying those blurs and doing a lot of filters, so they have taken away a bit of sharpness. We want to add a bit of contrast, sharpness, and a punch to this shot, and that's where we will be using our next filter. So let's do that. So just to increase a bit of sharpness, just to get some texture out of this, I like to use a filter called as the high pass filter. So we're going to go to filter. Okay, we're really stacking up those filters, you can see here, right? First of all, this can be done in a lot of ways. For example, under the sharpen part here, you have a lot of these like smart sharpen, unsharp mask. You can even use these, and these are relatively straightforward to work with. Like you can just click on this, change the sliders, and you can see it's going to increase and add a bit of punch to the shot. Okay, but I've always been using, since I've used Photoshop, I've always been using the high pass filter for this. So I like to use that. So go to other, go to high pass. And what the high pass filter does is, according to the radius that you select here, it just slightly takes out the frequencies of the texture, basically. So what you're seeing here is grayed out anything which was slightly more tonal in nature, and any frequency which was kind of related to the texture. It's just, kind of think of it like this, it's taken it out of the image. That's what you're seeing here. Okay, you don't want to go something like this, that'll be too much texture. Something like this, where you start to see those outlines, because those are the areas which you want to sharpen. The eyes, the hair, not necessarily the skin, okay? If you've done my portrait retouching for beginners course, obviously I cover, this is a 7-hour long course, where I cover all this much more in detail. So this is fine. If I click on OK, you must be thinking, but Kush, it's just turned everything into gray. So don't worry, that's because it's just separated those frequencies, right? Now we can go over to this filter here. Remember, if we click on this next to the filter, it opens up that panel where we get that opacity thing and other things. So you also get the blending mode here. So what I can do is I can tell Photoshop, listen, I like this texture that you've taken out, but put this texture on the other filters. Like, don't do this gray thing. So we can just use the blending mode as overlay. So whenever you use the high pass filter, you have to usually use the overlay mode. So it kind of, think of it like this. It takes out the texture and just puts that texture on the filters or the image that was underneath. That's all. So you get the best of both the worlds, and you can click on OK. If you're getting confused by this, you can use that smart sharpen or unsharp mask directly also and just play around with those sliders. Then you don't have to do all this. Just showed you both the approaches, okay? But just see, this really adds a lot of punch and sharpness to the shot. So before, if I just hide this, it's going to render it. It's just going to take some time, but just keep an eye. It's going to become a bit blur, right? Let me zoom in because it's a bit subtle, but you can see here. It's going to add a bit of punch as well as sharpness. So let me just, unhide this now and just see after it finishes the rendering process. And you can see just really makes it more cartoonish, more sharper, and adds that punch, okay? So we are pretty much done. If you want this, we can end it right here. But like I said, I want to add that, diffuse glow effect also, but we should not really affect the background too much. So let's also see how to do that. All right, so now all we have to do is just apply the diffuse glow filter. But the problem is that, like what we were seeing here was that when we applied it directly here, it was changing the background, right? So how to apply this again in a non-destructive way? Otherwise, very easy. I can, just merge all these layers, turn into one layer, then use the filter, diffuse glow filter also. But remember, we want to do things slightly in a non-destructive way. And that would have been possible if, let's say, each of these smart filters, we call them smart filters because they're a part of the smart object, had a mask of its own. Like we have a mask here, but that controls all the filters together. So if I was to use this mask, and restrict it only to where I want the diffuse glow filter to be there, it wouldn't work because it would remove the effect from all the filters here. So what we can do here, this is already a smart layer, turn it once more into a smart object, okay? Like this. And now think of it like this. There's already a smart object inside it, whatever work we did with it, but we are just now going to add the diffuse glow filter, okay? So it's just that we're repeating that whole process. So you can see here, that filter is selected, our values are correct. I'm going to press OK, and I was going to do that whole background thing that you saw before, right? But this time, the best part is since we just have one smart filter, which is the diffuse glow one, which is a part of the filter gallery, we have a mask for it, right? So what we can do is, right now, white conceals, black reveals, okay? So we can just invert this. Everything is removed now. That's what black means. And now, wherever you want this effect, mainly it was just on the cheeks and the face basically, right? So we can take our paintbrush, make sure white is selected, and just paint over there. So we get the best of both the worlds. You can see here, this looks really nice. And maybe even on the neck, you just mainly have to avoid the background. That's it. So I think it looks fine here also. And yeah, I think let me just zoom out. By the way, if you didn't understand this last step and you just want to basically merge everything together, then apply diffuse glow, it's also fine. Listen, a lot of these Photoshop people tell you always have to be exactly non-destructive. No, when you're starting out, it's okay to be destructive. I keep repeating that. As long as you get the job done as a beginner, that's what counts, and slowly become a smarter editor. But I think this looks really good. What I'm just going to do is I'm just going to crop this slightly. So okay. And finally, we have all this stacked. We have another smart object inside it, but let's just compare it to the original. So you can see this looks really, really well done. And also, finally, let's compare this final image with what we started off with. And you can see that that is absolutely mind-blowing. I think that was done really, really well. So I hope that you like this tutorial. Don't forget to check out my online courses related to photography, videography, and editing. You'll find the link to the description. I hope to see you in another video very soon. And of course, don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. See you.